You know, artists have a different way of vocalizing and letting you communicating what they're hearing. And I know that we were doing an Art Garfunkel album. How I got to do the Art Garfunkel album was very interesting. The guys down in Muscle Shoals Sound, they tried to get me on every artist. They would mention, you know, if you need percussion, we've got a great, you know, guy and all that. And so Paul Simon was coming in with Art Garfunkel for 2 days to do. They had been apart for many years, and they got together for a song called "My Little Town." And "My Little Town" was their one collab. They were both there and everything, and I worked on that, mainly just sitting around until finally the second day they had to leave, and they let me put what I wanted to put on, which was bongo and I think cowbell, and I can't remember exactly. I had about 10 minutes to come up with a part because they had to get over to Huntsville to fly to New York. The next night was the Grammy Awards in New York City, so they were wanting to get back to New York. So I put my parts down and all that, and weeks later I got paid for 2 days for all the sessions, you know, and then when the record came out, I had been replaced by Ralph McDonald, who Ralph McDonald was my idol. I mean, I that was the guy that, if as a percussionist, Hal was the inspiration, but from a percussionist standpoint, Ralph McDonald has always been, to me, the epitome of taste, time, and feel. He's like legendary for his perfect time. Mm-hmm. And so I was being replaced on that recording by the guy that I couldn't argue. I mean, he's Ralph, you know. But I found comfort kind of in it that he played the same instruments that I chose. No one told me what to play on the thing. He just did it Ralph's way. The bongos, the whole thing. All my parts were there. They were just played by Ralph in, you know, like Ralph would play them, you know. Mm-hmm. So it kind of was a bummer. But Barry Beckett wound up producing an Art Garfunkel solo record called Watermark, and it was all Jimmy Webb tunes. So he came back to Muscle Shoals a few months later, and I was on all those sessions. And that's to this day, that's one of the records I'm most proud of, because it's subtle percussion. It's different. There's one song, I've talked about this before in other interviews, but one song called Marionette. It's Jimmy Webb tune, and I had they wanted the sound of, you know, marionettes kind of clacking together, and I had some bamboo wind chimes that tried that, and Art said, "Nah, that's not quite right, because they sound hollow," and they are hollow. So, you know, marionettes are solid wood, carved wood. So Roger Hawkins had back in the closet a box of 30 or 40 old whittled down 5B drumsticks. That's what he played. Most of them were like a plastic tip, but they were all whittled down at the shoulder, you know, the shoulder and that kind of thing. And so I just got some string and strung up about 30 of them on a couple of microphone boom stands, and that's what's on the record. And sure enough, it's solid. It's, you know, but that's what the creative part of what I got to do down in Muscle Shoals. They let me do pretty much what I felt. You know, they would, you know, artists would suggest something sometimes, but I had pretty much free reign of what would come up with.
We've talked about that Garfunkel session before, you and me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you got a chance to actually spend some personal time with him.
Yeah, I did.
What was that like?
It was great because the first group of sessions, he came in with Jimmy Webb, and then Jimmy wasn't there for some of them. But so they would put Art and myself up in the Holiday Inn. So we would just drive over to the studio in one car, and back and forth, and it was really interesting getting. Very smart man. I really enjoyed kind of hanging out and listening to this very intelligent man talk about a lot of different stuff, from political, things to musical. But then I think we talked about one of the memorable nights that I remember in my whole career was he had sent the Hotel California had just come out, and you couldn't get a copy of it in Muscle Shoals.
What year was it? About 70?
77,
Yeah,
maybe
so
76, 77, 77 probably. And we sent a runner over to Huntsville to buy the record. And he brought it back, and that night, everybody else, we were done with the recording, and they let us stay in the studio and had a turntable in the control room, and he and I listened to that record top to bottom, both sides. That was when they had two sides to a record. But it was very interesting because he knew Glenn Fry and some of those guys through just meeting them in the business and that kind of thing, and I remember after almost every cut he would lift the needle on the track, and we'd talk about, he would talk about something musical about that, something that a part that was in the song that reminded him of something else, and it was just a really interesting after hours kind of thing, getting to hang with him. And he, in my whole career, I've gotten a lot of gold and platinum records from artists, but his was, and I don't have it anymore, his was the only gold record that I got a personally handwritten letter thanking me for it on. And that to me just says a lot about who Art is. Also, you hear different stories about their tumultuous relationship, he and Paul, but Art, it was a fun time, and I'm very, very proud of that record.